Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I thought I would do some shadow studies. This is an example of some shadow studies that I shared on Instagram over a year ago. But I realized I'd never really had a dedicated video to doing a shadow study here at YouTube. So today we're going to do that. I'm using the My Pet Kitties stamp set from Mama Elephant. It's a new set that just came out a little bit ago. And I'm going to be stamping a few of these images just in my sketchbook here so I can work with them. So shadow studies, the way I use them or the way I understand them, is just a way to kind of pre-plan exactly where you will do all of your shading once you start on your project. So for this first example, I'm having the light coming from the top left, and I first kind of map in where the darkest areas will be. Now, I will be the first to admit I am not the best at shadows. Give me some typography or some fun, whimsical illustrations, and I'm your gal in art class. But when it comes to shadows, I've always struggled a little bit. So doing these shadow studies really helps me. And even after I do them, I still kind of think to myself, that doesn't look quite right. But you just have to let it go and realize that you're just learning as you go along, you know? So, shadow studies are a great way to practice and get a little bit more experience. Now, over the last little bit, I have been obsessed with two different Instagram accounts of amazing artists and card makers who do wonderful things with shading and coloring and very dramatic scenes where the light is just phenomenal. I'll link to both accounts down below so you can check them out. But I really admire these artists' abilities to use light and shadow in a really dramatic way. And I wanted to do something similar. So I thought I would uh, map out these shadows, just try to do a little bit of exercise when it comes to shadows on my own. And this is the best way to really improve your art. Now, not everyone is going to want to do this, and that's totally cool. I love that approach, just very free form. You put your shadows wherever you want. And I think that's a great approach. It keeps it very nice and free, and there's not a lot of pressure. Because I admire these very accurate shadows on examples that I see online or in art in general, I personally wanted to really push myself to try to kind of hone that skill, get those shadows a little bit better. On the second cat, I'm thinking that the light is behind the cat. So the outer edge of the cat's body would have the most light on it. So this is one of those really dramatic positions of light that I've seen in some examples from those two card makers and artists that I have listed down below. This is just one of those examples that I really, really love, having that backlit situation. So going on to the third cat, I'm going to have the light coming from the top right, and I'm actually going to be turning this into a card, this one particular image. I think it's just so sweet. I really wanted to try painting it, so that is the one I'll be using today. And I also really liked how I was able to get the shading on this with the light coming from the top right. The cat is looking off in that direction. I thought it would make a lot of sense to have the light coming from that direction. In my card example today, I don't really have anything in particular that the cat is looking at, and I keep the scene really simple. But if you wanted to make this even more like finishing off the scene, making a complete scene, you could have the cat looking up at the moon or the stars, or, looking up at, I think it'd be really pretty to put a tall Christmas tree next to the cat, and maybe the cat's looking up at the top of the Christmas tree. There's endless opportunities for what this cat is looking at, and you can really stretch your creative muscles and make it your own. That's why I really love this particular image. So I'm continuing to add more shading. And the thing that I really reminded myself of, or what I rediscovered, I always knew this, but sometimes doing these shadow studies really has to jog my memory. When you're adding shadows, don't be afraid to get the shadow really, really dark. You want that contrast. As I was studying those examples on Instagram that I've told you about, I realized that they have a strong grasp on super, super dark versus very light. And that kind of struggle between the two contrasts is what makes it very dramatic and what I really love about them. So I'm trying to make sure that I really intensify those dark areas when I do these shadow studies. And when it comes to creating my card for today, I'm going to be painting that cat in layer upon layer of color, just trying to get it darker and darker and darker, with the intent of having super, super dark areas versus very, very light. And you'll see that once I get going. For this last example, introduce some other kind of shapes. You've got the knitting needles and the little blanket that the cat is knitting, and also the yarn ball off to the side. Just introduce some more interesting planes to shade. I really like this image too. It was a big debate between this image and the one previous for which one I wanted to put on my actual card for today. But in the end, the more simple image at the left won out. So I'm going to go back and add those darker areas onto this other cat. This was the first one I did. And after I started really getting going, I realized I did not add nearly enough shadow to this particular image. I really wanted to emphasize where the shadows were. And I enjoy how it turns out more now after adding more of that color. Same thing on this backlit cat. I wanted to add more shading in the center. So here are my 4 little cat shadow studies for today. I'm going to move right into my card. I'm stamping in Barely Beige ink from Simon Says Stamp. This is a ink color that is meant for no line coloring. And I'm going to be watercoloring this. So I'm using Arches watercolor paper and Magello Mission Gold paints. I'm going to be keeping it to just kind of a black shade, keeping it very monotone. I'll add a little bit of pink on the ears and nose. But I wanted to keep the coloring very simple so I could really focus on adding the shadows. I hope you can see how many layers I did of that painting, trying to get those dark shadows, but I do enjoy how it turned out. I'm now using the stamp set from Mama Elephant. I'm going to be putting this little greeting down here at the bottom, and I'm going to be stamping it multiple times. I'm barely pressing on the door of my Misty because I don't want to press too hard and have it kind of balloon out or squish the stamp too much. So I'm just barely pressing down and stamping multiple times until I get a complete line of text. And by doing it this way, you get a really crisp line. I like how that turned out by just stamping it over and over again. It takes a little bit of patience. You can't go too quick, but it does give you a better effect in the end. I kept this card super simple. I just trimmed it down to the right size for a 5x7 card and then adhered it to a black card base using some foam adhesive. That finishes the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this kind of walk through some shadow studies. I'm really taking this as an opportunity to practice more coloring. Just a reminder that this month is actually Kathy Rakusin, the Daily Marker. It's her 30-day coloring challenge. So if you want to do some more coloring, you can join her challenge at any time, do a little bit of coloring each day, and share on Instagram with the hashtag the Daily Marker 30 Day. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back very soon with another card video.